Welcome everyone. Good day for beautiful audience and people in the room and also across the globe on Zoom. I would like to express my gratitude first for your presence and your interest in this topic, and also to gratitude to all our teachers, our mentors, and all people who helped us to have insight and guidance where we are at now in this stage of our life. Just a moment of silence to say, let's take a moment. Let's take a moment because the topic that we are going to talk today about is trauma and its understanding and experience and treatment of trauma in Western psychology, combined and complemented by, or other way around, by Buddhist psychology and Indo-Tibetan Mahayana and Vajrayana approach to suffering, if you wish. So that's our topic. And let's set our attention, why we are here today, why we are listening to this. And why is this interesting to us, if anything? So just for a moment, let's put our intention in place and welcome everyone again. So thank you. This Ghatika, it's going to be, I hope, conversation and dialogue. I don't need to talk all the time, and please interrupt me anytime if you have a question or a comment or suggestion. But what I would like to talk for a second is self-care, because I'm going to mention a few things that might be very sensitive to people. They might cause some emotions that we might be triggered by a single word or an example. It's really a delicate topic. So I want us to be gentle, to care about ourselves. So if you feel that you need to move in your position or maybe leave the room for 5 minutes, or if you're at home, wherever you are, to take a glass of water, please look after yourself. That's really something that it's my plea. And my intention is to introduce trauma and complex trauma. Just a little bit of touch on notion, what is resilience? Of course, it's one perspective and it's coming from research, but it's not absolute truth. It's one of the ways to approach, and we will talk about recovery through the lenses and framework of Buddhist psychology and the 4 immeasurables that I'll mention later on. And also, maybe just a little bit at the end, what does it mean to flourish in life? And is that possible if we have suffered a lot? And also, maybe just a word for a few people who didn't come across our CCR website or my work. My name is Anita Milicevic. I was born in Croatia of Croatian father and Serbian mother. And as some of you may know, we had a war in the 90s. There was a very long civil war. And 25 years ago, at the very end of, after 4 or 5 years of conflict, I gained with my family, with my very young family, a refugee status in Australia and citizenship in Australia. And I'm very privileged that and fortunate to be able to do so. And then I pursued studies. I wanted to help people from the Balkans, regardless of their creed, religion, and nationality. I had desire to help them understand, because World Health Organization in 2000 declared that there were 20 million people traumatized by war. And there were hundreds of thousands of people in Australia who didn't speak English. And I wanted to help, and I learned English as I studied. And then I fall in love in research. because I learned that it enabled me to understand much deeper and better how. So I have a PhD in psychology on trauma. And that's something that I've learned too. So that's a little bit about me. Any questions at the very beginning? Any suggestions? Okay, yes, please.
How did you come to Buddhism?
Thank you. I was 16 when I read Siddhartha from Hermann Hesse, and I wanted to go to India right away. And of course, my parents wouldn't allow me to do so. And then I wrote a poem, Far Away is India. And that was it for a while. And then as soon as I came to Australia, all the circumstances started to come up that I come across Buddha Dharma. And His Holiness was coming, and I had friends who invited me for the Holiness's talk. And then I had a blessing in the middle of that talk to take Bodhisattva vows. But there was something there, okay, quickly, it's related to trauma, and I can refer this to later on. When my family arrived to Australia, with all the beautiful circumstances, we lived initially in a suburb with all groups of people who were in conflicts, which means Serbian Orthodox Christian, Catholic Croatians, and Bosnian Muslims. And we lived in a suburb that you didn't need English because everybody, like the basic supermarkets, everything was in those native languages. But my family didn't belong anywhere, because not only that I was a child of Croatian father and Serbian mother, but my husband was Serbian. So our children suffered a lot. They were bullied on the playground. And we couldn't and didn't want and choose the side. So why is this relevant? And then I come across this story. I took this book, Spacious Minds, that talks about trauma of Tibetan people. But I heard this story. I didn't know about this book. I don't think this book was published when I came to Australia. I've heard about monk Palden Gatso, who came to Tibet across the mountains after 33 years of torture in Chinese prison. And he asked His Holiness for audience to see him. And when they met, Palden Gatso said, I wish to tell you that I was in a great danger. And His Holiness asked, what was the danger? And he said, I almost lost compassion for my torturers. And that was the day when I entered wholeheartedly in the Buddha Dharma, because I said, I want to be that. I want to come to that point where there is a compassion and acceptance and love. And I'm still at the very beginning, unfortunately, but that's why and how I became, how Buddha Dharma spoke to my heart, and how I immersed myself into teaching. And then later on I met my teacher, and everything else started to evolve. So thank you for asking. So let's jump into deep waters. What is trauma? Like, what do we mean by trauma? Psychological trauma is an affliction. It's an affliction of powerless. So you need to have an experience that you have no power, no agency, no choice. That's the crucial point. And then, of course, it depends. Like I use usually an example of a car accident. There can be 4 people in a vehicle, and we have a car accident. Nobody is physically hurt, but there was a big crash. And people are, of course, in shock. And then 3 of those people are relatively okay, they recover in a few days, and 1 person is completely traumatized. That is, of course, conditions and circumstances, but also what we brought to this vehicle. How did we come? Did we have a conflict at home? Did we have something? Did we have a car accident in our childhood? There are many circumstances, so it's not what is happening outside only, but what does it mean for us internally? How do we perceive that? So it's that connection between outer and inner, if you wish. So it's affliction that where you perceive that you are powerless. You have no voice, you have no choice. It can be environmental, it can be circumstances, but it can be, and quite often unfortunately is, relationship. Relationship one-to-one, relationship in a community or on a bigger scale. So what is characteristic? Like we can experience post-traumatic stress, which means that we have all the characteristics of disturbance and intense fear and helplessness. We can have a sense of loss of control and also feel very strange or dissociated with our body. But if those symptoms are lasting for a month, month and a half or 2, that's not considered as post-traumatic stress disorder, or if you wish, suffering from trauma. And that is actually for many other things. People can be psychotic for 15 days. People can be psychotic for a month. That doesn't mean that they're going to develop schizophrenia or complex post-traumatic stress. There are a lot of circumstances. One of the most important, I would say, even that I'm a psychologist, I love science, I love helping people. What I've learned through life and research is that when people are struggling so intensely, if they can be held, if their space can be held for them in a safe way rather than medicating them, because it happens quite often that when in those moments we medicate people immediately, then they usually don't recover. It's very interesting. I'm not claiming every case. I'm very responsible for what I'm saying. But unfortunately, in our society and health systems, we don't have time and space and resources to allow people to be and to look after them for a while before we medicate them. And sometimes we have to medicate them. Sometimes, if you don't sleep 5 nights in a row and you have flashbacks and hallucinations. But hallucinations and paranoia, it's not necessarily connected with post-traumatic stress disorder. You can be highly functional individual. You can be, running a company, communities, sports events or organization and suffer from trauma. So what does that mean? It means that there is a constant fear in a person, hidden or expressed, very intense emotions, or clear memory of the event, but it doesn't have to be. We can pass by the supermarket and feel a smell of, a sandwich or a pumpkin soup or making up. And a smell is exceptionally strong trigger. And we don't have to have any memory. And then suddenly we are irritated, we are agitated, we are reactive. And what is really important that I wish to emphasize, trauma experience or suffering is not necessarily just a recall of memory. It's not an image that you have to see, sometimes we see, but it can just be reliving that experience, and sometimes in the first few hours we don't even know. Because we completely fuse, we completely reify, and we go into different perception of reality, different reactions that we need time to say, oh, what's going on? Or maybe somebody who look after us or who loves us or who is a good friend of ours can say, what's up with you? Like, what's going on? And then there is a constant state of vigilance. So what's happening with trauma? We go into survival state, we are alert, and what are you looking at is you have survival lenses, is where is the next danger? Where is the next threat? And you can't relax. You know, you just, and you're not aware that you're all the time alert. And you know, that can be, for example, sometimes expressed in, you know, a lot of work or, you know, super achievement. I'll talk about that later on, or it can be the other way around in lethargy. So with post-traumatic stress disorder, it's usually we have episodes of different behavior or a conduct, if you wish, which is basically behavior which is reflection of our inner world. And there is a lot of irritability, and that irritability can also be somatic, it can be in our body. It doesn't have to be psychological. So yeah, I said a lot. I filed a lot of information, so I'll pause just for a moment again. And if there is anybody online or here that wish to ask questions, please do. What I would like to do now, I would like to read just a very, very short poem, a verse really, from a woman. Her name is Shabab Shah, and she wrote these verses in 2000. She lives in England, in UK. She's an Afghan journalist and a poet. And she just writes few things. What does it feel? How does it feel like? What does it mean to be displaced? So she says, where do I belong? A bridge had collapsed behind me, all washed out, no way to cross over, cut off from the people who matter to me. Here are bits of me that cannot fit in any new pattern. I hold onto the memory. It links me to the other side of the river. I hold on tight to it like a child who treasures her doll. So now we will go deeper into suffering. Just for a little longer, I won't go really over this. It's very difficult, it's very complex. But I need to talk about complex trauma. That is different from post-traumatic stress. With complex trauma, there is almost nothing in the middle. It's you are either overachiever or you are completely paralyzed. That's a very typical distinction between the post-traumatic stress and complex trauma. In complex trauma, it's characteristics of something that lasts for a long time. And it has 5 most common troublesome features, like 5 points where people are really suffering. One is emotional flashbacks, so reliving emotions. And there doesn't have to be any chronology of logical events. And it's usually characteristic. It doesn't mean that complex trauma is happening only in the childhood. It can happen at any stage of life. For example, there was a study in 20 years ago, in 2005, talking about how soldiers, after the long war combat coming back home, some of them experienced such a complexity of trauma that they even changed. That was the first time ever actually discovered. They changed their coping, their attachment style. And I'm talking about attachment, not in Buddhist terms, but attachment of safe emotional bonding with your parent and later on significant other. So, for example, somebody who is very confrontational and wish to face the troubles can become very frozen and withdrawn, or it can become other way around. Somebody who is very withdrawn and quiet can become very aggressive. So there's the complexity. And it has a characteristic of intrusive thoughts, nightmares. And I never had nightmares, but I remember first years after arriving to Australia, I would have images in the space of my mind. I would go to a supermarket, but the image in front of me was, out of this world, horrific, and I would live with that all day. It was just, and that can come completely untriggered. It just comes. Usually if we are tired, usually, if we don't have enough rest, but it just pops up. And I'll talk about how to work with that later on. And of course, this can be dissolved, and it does dissolve. But it can, and then it depends what is trauma and how it developed. We can carry a lot of shame. One of the biggest consequences of victims of trauma is that, especially children, who are abused or had a difficult childhood, they internalize. Why children internalize? So I'm speaking science, I'm speaking what has been discovered by research and long-term therapies that, prominent therapists would write about their findings. For the child, when we are developing ourselves as a children, our bond with our parents or our caregivers, a significant other, is absolutely crucial to the point that being harmed or being threatened or not being safe or being ignored. You can be ignored, invisible. Your parents might love you, but they didn't have time, or it's so, what research says, it's almost close to the horror of dying. So for the child, it's like, I'm going to die. So what then child does, if you have a parent, you love your parent, and this parent is harming you, or it's abusing, or it's neglecting, you internalize that. You create a notion that you are definitely the reason why mom or dad are treating me this way. They love me, but it's my fault. They love me and I'm shameful, and they love me, I'm not good enough. I mean, we are not going to go into psychoanalysis of the childhood, but that's the fact. And it can happen later on in intimate relationship as well. When you love somebody and you open your boundaries and your exchange of life and circumstances, people who are closest to us, they have most power to hurt us. So that shame is a very, very strong arrest for any progress, and it's invisible and it's deeply internalized. But it's also very possible to dissolve that and to heal that. Then also something what happens very usual with people with complex trauma, they have a self-abandonment. So what does that mean? That doesn't mean that you have you can have nice clothing and regular food. You can even go to gym when you have a time. But you abandon completely unconsciously your needs. So everybody else is more important than you, which is beautiful. I'm not talking about altruism. Altruism is something else. I'm talking about complete neglect of your needs. Because it's easier not to be, it's easier not to, and there is a profound distinction between being aware of your basic needs, like food, shelter, safety, and love. We all need that. Those are our basic needs. To have a 3 jackets and 5 pairs of shoes, that's a different story. But I'm talking about, so there is in recovery with trauma, there is a great, the great beauty and progress to have discernment between your needs and your desires. For example, I can say this, that during my experience in a refugee camp, I was blessed. I say that I had an experience that I completely forgot about my needs. And everything what it was important was to live every day for the 2 boys, to help them to survive, and telling them stories that we are going to travel to Australia and never be hungry again. But when we arrived to Australia, I had to learn from scratch how important it is to have healthy boundaries, how important it is to address my own needs. So not only that I'm healthy and strong, but that the boys are learning, what does it mean to respect your own needs. So it's not about attachment and grasping, like I need this and I want that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the basic human needs. They are really compromised. And then another 2 things with complex trauma is that a person becomes a vicious inner critic. Like you are not good enough, you are never good enough. And then also there is a lot of social anxiety. There is anxiety about how we come across to others. I'm just looking at the watch, I'm talking a lot and I'm talking heavy stuff. So any question? Okay. So what is most difficult for people with complex trauma? What is the greatest challenge? Word trauma is such a overused term, if you wish. These days everything is trauma. What do we mean by that? I really wish to share a little bit what I know, what I discovered in work, in my personal life, in my practice, what I've learned from the most profound teachers and the people, indigenous people, if you wish, of our beautiful planet. Tibetan people, indigenous Australians and indigenous Americans. So the basic, I call it developmental arrest, because in our development, not only as a child or a young person, but hopefully every single one of us is developing as we live. We learn as we go. We become different and we evolve. And so what is then almost chained or locked or arrested? The first thing is self-acceptance. And I can weep now because I know so many brilliant people who are not even aware how beautiful they are. And why is that? Because somebody can tell you, you are so generous, you are so smart. Thank you for writing this, or thank you for doing that. But this person doesn't have a reference point, because it's never been nurtured. So if you are born as blind, you never had the sight, you couldn't see ever, and I'm pointing to you and explaining the rainbow. I mean, there are exceptions. There are people who have, but you can listen and you will remember and you will enjoy the story about rainbow and description about rainbow, but you don't know. So it's kind of washed through you or over you. And a lot of time, people are nurtured and supported, but they can't. They can't accept who they are. And they also, unfortunately, reify, identify, concretize, really, that they trouble in their minds, their flashbacks, the images that they have, the fear they all the time trembling, experiencing, insecurity, low self-esteem. They think this is me. This is who I am. If you just know who I am, you would never give me this compliment. That is a massive, massive obstacle. And then clear sense of identity doesn't exist really in the most difficult cases. Usually people have a very strong sense of loss, and that is connected, unfortunately, with their identity. What I discovered in my research, that people who have identified, reified themselves, I lost my country, I lost my language, I lost everything, my profession, as people do, those people, they have a very difficult time to recover. There is almost like a need for, at the very beginning of any recovery of complex trauma, to recognize the losses. But if we continue to identify, I remember the day when I declared to myself, we are no refugees anymore. There was no need. And then somebody said, but what about my suffering? Should I now just ignore everything what happened to me? No, we can create wisdom and giving. We can create, I'll talk about recovery. I remember I learned in the second year of, so I enrolled psychology from scratch, from undergraduate to year one. None of any qualification from, at the time, from Eastern Europe were recognized in Australia. Not even the driver's license, because it's the opposite side of the vehicle. So, I learned that, I'll talk about Bengala and brain a little bit, that you can feel sadness and happiness at the same time. People can do that. You can be on the top of the mountain and be happy that you are there with your friends, and be sad that maybe your sister or your other friend is not with you because they're not around or whatever. So we can do that. But there is no way, so far according to science, that we can be angry and grateful at the same time. That doesn't work. And it's even explained by the brain structure, which brain is not mind, of course. Brain is like a keyboard. But yeah, if you're one of the, in a keyboard, one letter is pressed and it's stuck, there are consequences. So what I've learned later on from Tibetans, I didn't know, I learned that from Western psychology. I would go to university lectures and I would be such a fake. I would fake gratitude. I didn't feel like it. I was happy that we are free, that we have food, and we had children going to school, we have shelter. But I wasn't kind of feeling grateful, really, unfortunately. So I practiced consciously, purposely imposing, finding real reasons. Like I have a vehicle I can drive to university. Who has that? It's such a fortune. Until a few months into it, it kicked in. It started to kick in, and it was really feeling like the heart open, and that spasm of defense. Because what is anger? It's hurt. Underneath anger is hurt. And what do you do when you are in hurt? You just want to defend yourself. You are separated. You're not interconnected. You feel lonely. You feel you are on your own. So self-compassion is also not there. I really wish to emphasize, I think in some circle of our friends and Sangha, I'm famous by a broken record talking about be gentle with yourself and try to learn self-compassion. And I'm really talking to myself because that's so crucial. If you are kind to yourself as a person, you cannot be unkind to other people. And sometimes we are triggered and we are not kind. Then self-care is neglected if it's complex trauma. Also capacity for full expression. What does that mean? When you are on defense and you are alert and you're like, I can't deal with this. And as we learned generationally now, people just say, I don't care. But it's not about that they don't care, it's that they can't deal with it. Then you don't have a capacity at the same time to be vulnerable, to be open-hearted, to say, I'm in pain. Because you might feel that you are less worth it, that you are burdened to others, but also you can't handle it. It's too tough, as one of my dear friends said to me a few times in our conversation. She said, I feel this is like a surgery without anesthesia. I can't go there. Well, there is a way to go there. And then there is no much willpower or motivation. Motivation is really not there, and it's crucial. We can't recover if we don't have a meaning of life. There is no capacity. So the person with complex trauma is completely stripped of capacity to take joy or comfort in any relationship. You can be nurturing as much as you want. You might have a partner who is giving, but you just can't. You just can't take it not because you don't love your partner, not because you necessarily don't love yourself, but you are arrested in this alert and alarm and survival, and you can't relax. And doesn't matter how much I feed you with trust and patience, because somebody asked me recently, one of our friends, while I was kind of preparing my notes for today, can you become a very bad person if you are traumatized? Well, you can certainly have very bad behavior, and you can have patterns of behavior. And it's quite often because it's all happening, remember, with shame and no self-care. People do not ask for help. People don't believe that they can have a help. People don't have a peace of mind. They don't relax, and there is a difference between coping, and they don't even know what is their style of coping. So I had a student once, I used to teach at university. It was the bachelor degree of mental health. And this beautiful young woman who was a full-time student asked to see me. And before that, on that very day, I was teaching lifespan development, which is basically different stages of child development, including pregnancy and fetus development. And I'm sorry if I am triggering with this example anybody's feelings. Please bear with me or do something. So this student came, and they knew about my work, and they said, can you help me please with... I said, of course, what can I do? She said, can you please give me tips? Tell me, how did you cope? How could you write thesis on trauma with your people when you were one of them? And I said, why are you asking? She says, I tried to become a mother. I tried to get pregnant and I couldn't. And every time when you have lecture on fetus development, I just can't take it. I'm just broken. I said to her, can I ask you questions? She said, yeah, sure. I said, what do you do when you have conflict with your husband? Oh, she said, I don't have much conflict. I just go to my room and I wait till things calm down and then we talk. And then I said, what do you do when you have a real challenge at work? She said, I wait. I just kind of am frozen. And then I asked her other few questions. What do you do if when this and that? And then I said to her, any advice that I can give you from my experience is completely irrelevant to you. She said, how? I said, my coping mechanism is to face it right away, which doesn't make me any better or worse from anybody else. And I didn't know that. I discovered as I go. So I could write a thesis. And the deeper I went, the deeper I understood. And I did ask for advice when I interviewed first family, who were tortured during the war. I asked later on, how can I cope with this? I also asked fellow researchers and professors about the method, because I needed to know that I'm not projecting my own experience to the data analysis. How can I do this? And this is how journal writing came. Like I wrote 30,000 words about all my expectations, fears, projections before I start to analyze data, the other people's stories, and then I would go back and check. So I said, I discovered that this is my coping mechanism. And what I need to learn is sometimes to be a piece of wood, to stay put. And that, because my coping is, let's tackle this problem, let's go into it. And I said, what I'm learning from you to my student is that you don't have that coping mechanism. You try to freeze, or you avoid the problem until there is enough safety or trust that you can start talking about. And I said, this is crucial for you. And then, of course, we talk about how we are going to arrange the lectures. And I said, you don't have to look the PowerPoint presentation. We can create a text for you. But you need to be aware of basic development of the child. And this is the way how you cope. So how do we cope? What is our tendency with the problem, let alone trauma? It's very important to learn, among many other stuff. So then we talk a lot about psychological coping. We talked about symptoms in a nutshell. This is just a nutshell, really. I also just want to touch base on brain function. So again, not that brain is mind, it's definitely not. But the streaming of our mind is going through that organ of ours, and I usually use that metaphor that the brain is a keyboard. So the brain has all the time perception system that is threatened by under the trauma. You can even have a meditation session, but there is a threatening, there is alarm in the background. How is that? If we scan the brain, we can see there is an amygdala. There is a part of it's actually in the center of the brain. It looks like a nut, and that a lot of people we joke and say this is what's driving you nuts, because it's enlarged. If you're experiencing constant anger or alertness, that part of the brain is enlarged. That's why, as I mentioned before, it's very difficult to experience gratitude and anger at the same time. It just doesn't work. And then there is something that is called vagus nerve, that is connected with our brain and our gut and our body. And just recently I found a book, thanks to a friend as well, Vagus Key to Trauma Healing. There is something fascinating about it. We knew in psychology that, remember I talked about that shame? One of the most powerful ways to dissolve and heal from that shame is to reveal your experience of shame in a safe environment. With somebody that you know that is understanding, and it's your witness. And that person doesn't have to be a psychologist and to fix anything for you. but that you know that I did something or something happened to me or somebody, imposed this or made the hurt to the even, insult to the injury, already existing injury. Then if you can say this in a safe environment, somebody that you know it's understanding and it's safe and it's going to hold that space for you. As Renee Brown, a famous American researcher in social sciences, she used this metaphor that shame is like a bacteria in petri dish, in laboratory, in the dark, and it's growing. And then you take this glass dish to the sunlight, and everything is just, it's gone. So what this got to do with vagus nerve? So this German therapist on trauma, his name is Gopal Norbert Klein, wrote a book and conducted a research that people who are traumatized and they have a constantly this sense of unease or agitation or just alertness, and you are always kind of what's next. If community of people, a group of people or an individual can talk through this, he names it honest sharing, that nervous system, by the sheer release of that tension, that story, that it's actually regulating. That's why, we didn't know that back then, but reconciliation processes in communities, admitting harm that was done indigenous people and talking together. It's like healing almost generational trauma. And I'm not saying that we have to dwell on it, identify it with our story, claiming this is my identity, which I just said that this is not really useful. So how to find the balance and create a safe space in a community, in relationship, individually, with your fellow friend, a therapist, colleague, a family member. That's what very soon I'll talk about Buddhist psychology is offering so generously, so powerfully. In this book, Spacious Mind, it's Trauma and Resilience in Tibetan Buddhism. The author, Sarah Lewis, she's the woman who conducted research. She talks about Tibetan view, Buddhist Tibetan view, that you don't dwell and you don't talk about realities too much, but that balance how you have agency around your story. For example, for human rights, for refugee rights, like it's important to say your story. And you have agency, and you have witness, and you are safe. It's very similar to, and then I'm just looking. I'll go quickly around normal body reaction to traumatic events. So it's very normal when we are in state of shock, because this is our physical natural predisposition. We might be frozen, shaking, screaming, that we react in that way to abnormal circumstances. So that's also very important to understand. Even these days, where we are at in our civilization and life and times, there is enormous stigma. There is enormous stigma on mental health, but not even that. Like, look at you, look at how you're reacting. There is something like, if you, as they say, God forbid, break your leg or hurt yourself and you're bleeding, and then you are kind of sweating and crying and screaming, that's fine. It's, obvious you're physically hurt. But if you're instead of shock or something happens and you have similar reaction, it's not like, what's wrong with you? Unfortunately, we still have that. The safer, the more understanding the environment, because we are not on our own, everything is dependent and integrated and interrelated. the easier is to recover, to cope. And one of the most profound insults to any trauma injury is when a person expresses their feelings, their emotions, which is not the same thing, and then they are diminished. Or like, come on, get over it. Like, come on, pick up yourself and don't do that. You know, there is, and culturally there are different cultures where mourning and grief is like culturally supported, it's nurtured. You know, on the Balkans where I grew up, there is a 40 days when somebody passes away that you are, it's socially acceptable. Everybody comes and brings food, and you can fall apart, and you can be, on semicolon, dysfunctional, and because you are mourning. And then it's kind of, and it's shown through the centuries that these 40 days working. Similarly, which also can be traumatic and very joyful as well, giving birth. So on the Balkans, society was at the time very patriarchal, very warrior society. Women were nurturers, householders. You know, they didn't even have many rights, if you wish. But when a woman gives a birth to a child, 40 days, she is in absolute care. And, you know, a family comes to bath the baby, helping to learn around the baby, clean the house, bring the groceries. Neighbors are coming. Like, you are not, there is no way you can be depressed. So there is a nurture. And I remember when our first son was born, after 40 days, I can share this, it's a true story. My mother-in-law, who was there every day, she took long-term annual leave. It was all prepared. She said, okay, the investment in health of this family is finished. Now you are on your own. You can ring me if you need anything, but off I go. And it's nothing unusual. That was culturally, and the same is with grief. That's why, for example, in Tibetan Buddhist culture, in Eastern European culture, trauma is not necessarily equally and similarly processed as in Western psychology culture. And you know, the trauma was really tackled and addressed first time after the First World War. That was the time when things started to be very... So body awareness is important, that body remembers. So you can even heal psychologically, which happens because it's gradually and sometimes it's interrelated. But you can have a bodily sensation, you can have triggers, you can have involuntary movements of your body from time to time that is like something in the tissue of your muscle, in your nerves, is remembering. And there are different ways of healing for that as well. Okay. Yes, please.
I hear you about it being very, you can't experience, or it's very challenging to experience anger along with gratitude. What do you think about feeling gratitude for the anger and for what it might have to say or to teach? The reason I ask, I heard a Hindu teacher, and she said, if you can disassociate with the thing that is making you angry, and just feel it, she says it's a very exquisite emotion. And I tried to work with what she said, and I found it very helpful. What do you think of that?
Yes, I find it recognizing helpful. Thank you. So the question was about anger and gratitude, and what did you say? How we experience the feelings of anger? Again, underneath every anger, it's hurt. And usually, also I wish to mention this, I believe it's important. Unfortunately, for the long time, in our societies across the globe, anger was socially acceptable by men and less socially acceptable by women. So a lot of men would, instead of expressing sadness, because you couldn't be, it wasn't expected that you are weak, that you are vulnerable, that you are suffering, and you could say I'm in emotional pain. Like that was inconceivable 50 years ago in some societies. So then, suppressing that, we have anger. Okay, how do I agree with that? Is there is a profound difference between two phenomena. One is I'm really angry. I'm upset and I'm angry. That's one thing. And another is, ooh, anger is arising. Anger is arising in the space of my mind. Ooh, it's even like, so this is complete identification with it. You know, like it's not that this sensation and psychological process, emotional process, nervous system process is happening with, like you are completely fused with it. I'm angry. This is injustice. I'm completely angry. And you know, many people say in research and science work and social science and psychology, like the degree of anger is healthy. I wouldn't go there. I'm not saying it's pathological or not healthy. I'm just saying there is a different way. I think it's in line what you heard in teaching. That is, this experience of anger is just coming up.
I've found that what you are saying is true, in the sense that if I just observe the anger, or if I detach from the thing that's making me angry, and I observe the anger coming up, that there's profound sadness under that.
Thank you for sharing that. So when we observe anger coming up, I wouldn't even say, please allow me, not that you detach from anger. You are actually creating a space in your mind, or you can say heart mind, or whatever you want to call it, your experience. I'm not imposing. You are creating a space where anger can arise and you can experience sadness, which is still fusing, but it's completely different process. And I would dare to say that then you have a choice. You have choice of your conduct, which makes a crucial difference. When you're fused with your anger, then your conduct, even that you're most beautiful, good intentional person, and it could be that then you already slipped. I'm not saying that every anger is connected with trauma. Certainly not. You can be hurt without trauma. There is a difference. But you are then reliving it. You are reliving something that it just triggered, reminded, and called upon. And there is no space for choice. And that's what Viktor Frankl talks about with his book, A Man's Search for Meaning in concentration camp, where he learned that even in the most horrific of circumstances, we can have a choice by a space of our mind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other question, comment? Yes, please.
From my own childhood experience, I've learned to forgive. So can you mention, does it help? I keep telling them to forgive until there's nothing left to forgive. Because this person doesn't know what they're doing. It just happened to me, it's over, but forgiveness helps me to move forward.
Thank you for asking that and sharing. So the comment and question was about, from my childhood experience, I learned to forgive, and I'm praying to forgive. That is profoundly important, and I'll talk about that in a minute, because without capacity, our ability to understand the perpetrator or the abuser or person who didn't have skillful means to love us. They loved us, but they didn't know how. It doesn't have to be severe. We need to understand the context, and then compassion comes. and then forgiveness comes. And if we cannot allow ourselves, and a lot of people who know my work and my life, they know that there were horrific circumstances what people done, but when you understand, so I'll talk about that in a minute, and that is touching not only about recovery but resilience. So also there are a few words in our current knowledge of society and mental health. One is trauma and another is resilience. And from business, from sport, burnout, and also I wish to say coping mechanisms and resilience are not the same thing. Resilience is interactive process. We are not born resilient. And I claim this. People are not born courageous. I'm not saying that we don't have imprints in our mind. Of course we do. And we are not tabula rasa when we are born, that's for sure. There is a lot of genetic there is a lot of stream of mind and consciousness, so we are bringing a bouquet and a package, if you will. But for example, courage is something that can be trained and learned. Courage is not absence of fear. I guarantee you that. I've done some things in life that I was full of fear, but I was like, keep going. And I didn't think about courage as such, but you do things despite of your feelings of fear. And the similar thing is with resilience, that there is ability to be flexible with the different coping mechanisms that are functional. So resilience doesn't mean that you are avoiding pain and that you are cutting out pain. It's the other way around. Because there are a lot of people who are suffering so gracefully, so are able to hold the space, to process, and to be flexible. No, it's not just bouncing back, But it is. Sometimes if you need to cry in fetus position, on your bed for 2 days and make a cup of tea, if that's your first step, and then third day you are up there, training your mind, talking to your friends, doing stuff, then that's resilience. It's not just like, look at me, nothing touches me. And how is different from coping? Coping is something that you are related. Coping is all about stress management. And it can be very dysfunctional. It can be, drugs, drinking. It can be overwork. It can be lying. It can be, covering up, manipulating, that we don't even know that we are doing. It can be being numb, being dissociated, being isolated, feeling on your own, not mixing up with people. It can be many things, but it can be very positive. It can be very positive. What it really comes out is that, which is crucial, and I'll talk about Buddhist framework of coping. You don't have to be a Buddhist, of course, but there is something profoundly to learn there. It's this interdependence. So resilient people they are very much practicing interdependence of circumstances, awareness that they belong somewhere, that there is somebody to help, that you are not on your own, that you can be vulnerable to open your heart, because opening your heart in that way, metaphorically speaking, opening your mind, you are promoting recovery. You are embarking on the journey of recovery. And then that also includes self-compassion, of course. So to answer to your question about understanding, the first process of recovery is to really start to be, there is a beautiful meditation practice developed by Lama Alan Wallace. It's called Fourfold Vision Quest. So what would you like to, what is your purpose, what is your motivation, what would you like to achieve or give it to a world, etc. And why I'm mentioning that, because first thing is, what is your meaning in life? Even in the most dire circumstances. Are you clear? What is it that you really, what is precious to you? What is that you value the most? And these are the things, you can say, all this here I can compromise. And this is sacred. This is my meaning, this is my purpose. You don't have to achieve all of that and tick the boxes. It's not about that. It's about That I cannot emphasize how important that is. And then you internalize those values. I'm looking at the time. There is a famous study, psychiatric study. There is a journal that I use in my thesis from United States. I think it's worth it of mentioning because it's such an example of how values can be important. There was a young woman in South America at the time. I don't need to mention the country. It was really a dictatorship and civil war, and she ended up in prison. I'm not going to go into detail, but she was held in that prison for a few months, and she was severely tortured. And the part of the torture was humiliation, so that that was purposely done. She was fortunate enough to be released, and when she came home, in that particular cultural milieu, her father and her brother, who loved her, they couldn't cope, the family couldn't cope about the stigma and the harm of indignifying her. So the whole family managed to pick up some money, buy a ticket, and they sent her to Australia. And she was, there is a foundation house in Australia who was at the time treating refugees from South America and this particular regime. So she was relatively recovered, and she started a new life, and then she married a man from different culture and different religion. And after 2 years of the marriage, she disclosed to him what was happening to her back there in prison. And he couldn't cope. He couldn't cope, but not only that he couldn't cope and that marriage was collapsing, but he was actually abusing her because he was traumatized by her story. And then after 2 years of that such marriage that collapsed, she moved to United States. She moved to United States and started working and had a complete breakdown at one moment and ended up in psychiatric ward where this case study was published with this psychiatrist. She was hallucinating. She was in psychosis for a month and a half. She couldn't cope until one day, when you are in psychosis, we call it in and out. You can be psychotic 6 hours and then you have 15 minutes of complete clarity. In one of those moments, the psychiatrist asked her, of moments of clarity, of course, all this time, while you were tortured, humiliated, mistreated, abused, did you ever give up on your values? Humanity, of dignity, of that, like core human values. And her answer was never. And that moment of recognition of these inner values, I'm not saying she recovered right away, but it literally, the psychosis stopped. And that was, of course, then a health approach and management about her recovery, and she completely recovered. And it's also known, and I found in my research on refugees, I interviewed 47 people, husbands and wives, mixed marriages, children, and people who compromise their values for whatever reason. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's horror, sometimes you are forced. They do recover, but slower and more difficult. So this is how important our values. So from that framework of compassion, of humanity, of dignity, of not hating, you can even be angry, but don't hate. Angry you are because we talked about it can be many things. So that is the space for understanding. You cannot recover, you cannot forgive if you don't understand what have happened to this person. That doesn't mean that we are approving this person's actions. Because I shared once, which I'm not going to talk about today, I shared one story in one of the international workshops, how I met a man who tried to kill my son after 16 years. And I had a profound conversation with him, and I saw regret in his eyes. And there was one person in the audience, he said, "So no consequences, you're justifying." I said, "No. Oh no." But can you imagine the horror of the mind of the person who has urge to kill the child because child is of different nationality? And to see after 16 years that this person is sorry? Which I said to my son, people do change. Do I approve that? No. But there was no point. There was no point in time, in system, in justice system that this person would be accountable. It was war. But that meeting, that understanding, that space, that's what are you saying about. Thank you. And then accepting and caring and discernment. It's the most profound. There is Buddha said, I'm horribly paraphrasing, if something is true, but it's not useful, don't say it. Or if something is truthful and it's useful, choose the time. And if something is harming and it's not true, don't say it. And so this discernment, and quickly then, what does it mean to recover? What does it mean to start to recover? First thing is you have self-coherence, you are coherent. What does that mean? So you are pursuing understanding, and you are maintaining, nurturing, practicing your personal values. And that is also creating flexibility, because the values can be changed. We change our values. And it's great until we are aware of it, as far as we are aware of it. And then authenticity. I cannot emphasize how important this is. We are all born, according to the Buddha teaching, we all have Buddha nature. We all have this purity. According to the Western science, when we are born, we have two core needs. One is to have a safety bond, emotional bond with our parents, with our nurturers, so that later on we are feeling safe, comfortable and confident to let go, to be flexible, to be spacious. But if we don't have that initially, we are in big trouble. We can make it, but it's going to be painful. And the second thing is authenticity. We are born authentic. And I would say we are born with Buddha nature and authenticity. And what we learn when we grow up in our school, in our family, in our relationship, in our society, we learn to be inauthentic. We learn to cover up. Because it's risky, it's painful, somebody's going to harm us. So we are all authentic. We just need to remove those layers. And that is part of the recovery. Remember, talking about that shame, talking about things that you are not, like I had a client, a woman client who was 50 something, and she was telling me how, her first love and stuff like that. And I said, okay. And she was actually seriously disclosing me how she seduced this person, this man. And I was listening, and then I asked, how old were you then? She said, I was 14. So it took me kind of a few sessions to she internalized. To say, 14, that's a child abuse. Was a next door neighbor. But that interaction herself, persuade herself, internalize completely that it was completely her doing, it was so shameful, and that is actually quite often what is happening. So to unpack that, and I again, I'm talking about very sensitive stuff, very heavy stuff, so I'm sorry. So understanding, accepting, caring, openness to experience, and we can't when we are in traumatic lock. And also one more thing, that it's really, really stages, there are layers of recovery. And you can be recovered from massive stuff. And 5 years down the track, something else completely innocently can trigger you. So how do we work with this? So there is also a quote from an anonymous poem who said, how we are in shame, we are locked, we are suffering, we are angry, we are in spasm, we are in this bud. And said, and the day came, the day of unbearable pain. You can't cope anymore. You are struggling at your work, you're struggling in society, you're struggling in a relationship, nothing works again. And it said the day came when the risk of remain closed tightly in a bud become more painful than the risk it took to blossom. You can't take it anymore. And you open up. So what are we opening up to? How we can open up? How is it possible? This is where Buddha Dharma, this is the Buddhist way of life comes like a mighty realm and help. And this is the Mahayana and Vajrayana part in the Tibetan concept of bodhicitta, which bodhi means awaken, awake. And chitta means meaning like heart, mind. So you have awakened heart and mind. And what is characteristic of Tibetan people in exile and everywhere that I know of, and from literature and interactions, and that they pray every day, may I, have that awakened bodhicitta in my heart. They have this aspiration and they pray in the most dire circumstances. May my heart be open enough, awakened. And they have this view and conduct. The view. So what I'm talking about is, I can talk about therapy process, social interaction process, self-healing process, research concept, research framework. I'm talking about what is my conceptual framework, what are the lenses, how do I see the world? And these are the Buddhist lenses. This is the worldview that it's actually also methodology and therapeutic method that we can combine, we can take and complement and enrich everything we do, education system. Not that children are becoming Buddhist, no. But that we create space for compassion, for loving kindness, for empathetic joy, that we practice joy and virtue of the heart. And what I found out here is just recently, research on Buddhist spirituality from UK, University of Manchester, from November 3rd, 2025. This is when it was published. Where this university, with their researchers, specifically with counseling psychologist Minwo Keng, who is from originally from Thailand, he wrote a paper and he explains why is this Buddhist framework, Buddhist psychology, what is this all about, and how it's different from mindfulness. So basically, I'm going to read, he says, mindfulness has become popular in workplaces and therapy rooms, but it's also often stripped of its deep spiritual roots. So Kang, the researcher, explains, when used only as a productivity tool, like let's chill and calm down, and let's be productive after this because we have this exercise and it's useful, but it's basically a productivity tool. It risks becoming part of the very system that causes people distress. And it's being reported. And then Buddhism in its full context reminds us of compassion, interconnection, and humility. And then this very researcher Kang in his paper proposes that Buddhism as method, this framework, uses Buddhist teachings such as impermanence, that everything is changing all the time, conditionality, that everything is conditioned with the circumstances, relativity to critically examine the ways the mental health practice reinforce social injustice these days, and notion of individual blame, which I talked a lot, and shame. And he's also talking about how a training of spirituality or Buddhist concept in this way, which is, I'm going to focus in a moment on 4 immeasurables, it's really a force for change for our personal life, for our environment, for our economy, if we provide this deep connection. He's talking about deep connection and collective actions. This Ghatika will be a little bit longer. I'm going to hurry up. I'm going to talk about virtues of the heart. I know that many of you are very, very, very well familiar and knowledgeable about the 4 immeasurables, much more than I have been. But so, how is this possible? We can practice loving kindness, and we can fake it. But don't give up. Don't give up. Because it's like a drop of the water on the stone or a piece of ice, and it's going to melt. And there is going to come a day, I'm not joking, I'm very honest with you. You know what I used to do when I started learning Buddha Dharma? At university, I was a PhD student. I would wait for women at the corridor, fellow students coming, and especially if it's ethnic women. And then I would open the door for her and gaze at her and say, here you are. The joy, the surprise. Those were my secret exercises. And then it's a heart, and what is loving kindness? It's not just that. It's heartfelt yearning, that yearning, that we have a vision that other people experience genuine happiness. We need to practice that. Yeah. And then we have approximate causes of that, and then we have a false facsimile, like a really fake. So what is really fake to loving kindness? Is attachment, in Buddhist terms now. So, I'll be kind to you, but you need to supply me with something. It's affection or, a piece of work or resources, come on. And then we're talking about transaction. We are not talking about loving kindness. So this is where discernment kicks in. And then, of course, there is also completely opposite of that, unfortunately, that you wish somebody that it's not well. That's really the dark side of it. So there is something that is similar to loving kindness, but it's not. and the real one is that yearning, may you be well. So they usually say, look at the person when they receive bad news, they receive what they really don't want, and they still kind to you. They're practicing loving kindness or not, or maybe they can't, maybe they cannot. And then compassion. Compassion is different from empathy, we know that, which is sharing feelings and being in somebody else's shoes. This is more having an attitude and action that may I be the one who can, remove all the obstacles and suffering of every sentient being. And to have that aspiration every day in your sleep, in your everyday life, to have that aspiration, it just opens our mind. It creates a space where we can observe anger instead of experiencing anger. We can observe and experience sadness, but there is spaciousness about it. And as recently one of the teaching, Lama Alan said, when you see something beautiful outside, offer it. If it's I've watched in my life quite a few times the sunrise, but only in Colorado, in the sacred Maya Samtenlinga, I watched here the moonrise. And and when you watch that beauty, can you offer it to somebody? Can you offer it to everyone? Empathetic joy. With these practices, we are also practicing how we rejoice in other people's virtues. You don't have to do anything for me, but when I see you, how beautiful and hardworking and generous and genuine you are, or good intentional, or trying hard, I just rejoice. All of us. And it's a very good exercise, very pragmatic exercise. And then impartiality. And then also, I have here this table about proximities. Empathetic joy is not hedonism. It's not like having, I don't know, going and buying things that we don't need. Nothing wrong with that. From time to time, people do that, but that's not empathetic joy. And when you are busy and you have children, and instead of sharing a joke with them or watching a movie, you can't, and then you buy them stuff, and that's not a joy of sharing. And impartiality, even-heartedness. Can we wish well equally to everyone? And how we practice that, which is opposite of cold, like I don't care, I don't want to know, this is not in my suburb, it's not in my city, and it's not in my country. So those are the 4 mighty measurables. And then I wanted to mention flourishing, or psychological, emotional, social, spiritual well-being that is coming from within, that is coming from our work on these 4 immeasurables. There are also other practices in Buddhism like Lojong, where we take everything what we're experiencing as a practice. But we have to have that spaciousness of the mind. There is a one word of the mighty Tibetan people who cope with their trauma and exile. I think I marked it here. When they practiced the test training in mind, they said, give all victory to others and take defeat for yourself. I wanted to read, to honor those words. So for flourishing, from us to go from recovery to flourishing, to real well-being, to authentic well-being, we need to have self-awareness and practicing that. Introspection, it's impossible without introspection. It's impossible without this Buddhist notion that everything is interdependent. And the first thing, remember what happened with trauma, is that we believe we are on our own. We are isolated, and we are not safe. So Viktor Frankl quote, life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or quest for power, as Alfred Adler taught, but a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her own life. And B. Alan Wallace, who wrote about eudaimonia as the quality and the state of mind that can rise without dependence upon outside circumstances. Again, we need food, shelter, safety, and love. Nobody's denying that. But it's been researched and proved that if you have one house and you have another one, second one, and you have one or two vehicles, your sense of happiness and safety can increase. But if you have after that 5 houses, nothing is going to make you more happy about that. If you have inside job that it's not done and a lot of struggle they are happening. So yeah, it's the Flourishing is a model of genuine happiness, and CCR has a wonderful program with 6 intelligences, 6-fold matrix, which is a different story, but it's at the core of healing any trauma and nurturing and cultivating genuine well-being. Also, flourishing means a genuine well-being where we come to the point that we can distinguish between mental health illness and the symptoms and the causes, like, oh, this is causing me to be agitated. How can I work with that or avoid that? It's not dissociation. Dissociation is not really healthy per se. It's opening the space of the cognition, of the mind, of attention, of emotional stability to observe and to integrate all of that. And His Holiness's words that His Holiness Dalai Lama, I believe that very purpose of our life is to seek happiness. Whether one believes in religion or not, whether one believes in this religion or that religion, we are all seeking something better in life. So I think the very motion of our life is towards happiness. It's this genuine happiness. We are going to hopefully have now a Ghatika meditation session. But before we go into this beautiful shared space of our awareness, firstly, I really wish to acknowledge and express my gratitude from the bottom of my heart for your listening. It's been quite an effort to listen this very strong accent and this very difficult topic, and a lot of points that probably we are all affected a little bit. There is always sensitivity around that. So thank you for your contribution. Please, if you have any question, I would maybe like to have questions now. And then we can have a nice wrapping up in an equipoise of shared space, a little bit of loving kindness meditation. Yes.
Do you have one online which I can read? I would just say if there's anybody else in the audience who wants to ask a question, if we could do the mic, that would be amazing. So this one is from Till. Thank you very much for your talk. How compatible do you see Western psychology approaches to trauma and Buddhist approaches to suffering/trauma? How do they best work together?
Thank you for the question. Firstly, there are different concepts. I don't even think, and according to our literature, that there is a concept, as the question also indicates, there is not concept of post-traumatic stress disorder within the Tibetan Buddhist principle of healing the mind. But there is certainly knowledge about suffering and circle of suffering, and why do we suffer. So there is also cultural notion, the children were growing up in society where you are learned to be individual and independent, and that means you don't rely on anyone, and to grow up in a society and culture where you learn about change is normal thing, and you learn about that there is community there. So what I think is Western psychology I pray every day to be open to Buddhist psychology. If you don't want to use the word Buddhism, like, what is the worldview? How are these people? Let's have an urge and desire to understand something. So, what does it mean to cope, to flourish, to recover within the Buddhist psychology terms? Obviously, there is a science. Like I always say, may I be forgiven, Buddha was first scientist, Buddha was first psychologist. And there is a knowledge, there is also a technology, and there are also methods in Western psychology to that we can learn and we can accept, but there is so much more in Buddha Dharma that it's heartbreaking that we are not still completely open, because, for example, we are using introspection here in this very center, proving in our research that it's reliable, testifiable, and it's actually very powerful for the health of our mind. We still have a problem with 150 years of research in psychology saying that introspection is not a valuable tool. So how? Let's be open to the paradigm. Let's be accepting. Everything what I mentioned in this talk about healing trauma, understanding, acceptance, collaboration, this is the way to learn from the sages, from thousands of years of wisdom about science of mind in Tibetan, Indo-Tibetan Buddhist tradition, and many other traditions, but today we're talking about this. So I hope I answered that question.
So thank you, Anita, for your beautiful teaching. And if it's okay, I would like to very shortly say something about a client that I'm working with, and I would like your opinion. And also I would like us all to hold space while there's people listening to this for this lady. She is a refugee. And in her home country, she had a very high, powerful position. She is very highly educated, and she was advocating very strongly for women's rights and children's rights. But with the regime whistle change in her country, she had to leave. And there's a lot of trauma on losing her status, her power, not being loved and known here as she was in her place. And of course, all the pain about what's happening in her country. But what I feel as problematic now in our work is that she, in this situation where she's living now, she receives an allowance from our government, but it is a very small allowance and it's even decreasing. And so she experienced a lot of basic stress in daily life. She has financial problems. And so her stress system, the anxiety for basic survival is being reactivated all the time, which makes it really hard now to help her to calm down and to take time to be with whatever is coming up and whatever she's dealing with. So I don't know if there's anything I can do regardless this stressful situation for her.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me put this way. Of course, I don't know much, but you said beautifully, articulately, the basic issue. First of all, let her talk about that fear and acknowledge, you may be that witness, that important witness, acknowledge that she is experiencing the difficulty that she is, and even that that's obvious. I think in your beautiful, compassionate way, to be with that person in that moment, to acknowledge that would be the first step. So you would elicit that conversation about her safety, her existential fear, and to normalize that, which is very important in therapeutic condition, is to normalize that, if you don't have enough to, eat or pay rent, yes, indeed, people freak out. So to normalize that her reaction is normal according to the abnormal circumstances. That's number one. Number two is to maybe you don't have to fix anything, but see maybe there is no space and everything what I'm going to say is not going to be applicable. But if it happens that there is space, bear in mind, this beautiful woman doesn't have knowledge. She doesn't have a set of skills how to live, how to manage small resources, little money, because she lived affluent life. So maybe to work around that, that would help her safety. And the third thing, the maybe last one, or a parallel to everything what I said, to talk about that value system. Because according to your sharing, I might be wrong, it feels like, it seems like that she's still holding, and it's probably very cultural as well. And I know many people from my country who suffered enormously. I know somebody who was a rally driver and a very successful engineer, and he didn't want to drive taxi in Australia because it was below, the value system that they held and the status that they held. So gently probe that, and to find the values that are consistent, that she is valuable regardless of the status, and acknowledge the culture of the place, that like was she, and acknowledge the suffering. So basically witnessing, seeing if you can address her skills about management. There is a difference when you live affluent life and when you have government help and you have to like really plan everything. Maybe she doesn't have a set of those skills at all. And is there anything that she can learn that you can help her around that? And then the values, the core values. What is the meaning of her life now? Even when she feels fear and she doesn't know that she's going to have enough food for the end of the month. And for her to feel safe, to open that all up or pile out if you wish, or dissolve and reveal in front of you, it would be enormous help. So I hope that some of these things will be helpful. Thank you. Let's rest for a while. Let's have a Ghatika and try to bring forth our motivation. Try to ask ourselves, why did we attend this Ghatika, this topic and theme, and why we talked about this, and let's step into a space of spaciousness, of our awareness together in our shared space online and here in the chapel, in our sacred space for all of us. So we are stepping out of this very time, and we are stepping into different places across the globe. We are all together, and settling our body, speech and mind in a natural state. Just observe the space in front of you. Noticing luminosity, light. So attend to yourself. Let's be kind to ourselves after such a heavy talk and topic. illuminate loving kindness, internalize loving kindness. And attend to yourself as lovable. You are immeasurably loving, loved and lovable. And abide in field of love. In fabric of compassion, the field of kindness. Attend to yourself with gentleness. Attend to yourself like a loving mother, like a loving parent. See, feel the love and kindness from this space of attention, affection, this light, light of infinite compassion. And see what comes to mind or is appearing in space of your mind. Observe the space of your mind and see if there's somebody very close to you, a person you can trust, somebody you admire, or somebody who is intimate with you by heart, and attend to them, attend to this person with all your love and kindness. Attend to this person with compassion. Attend to this person as a real friend. Tell them, you can rely on me. I'm here for you. I care about you. Tell them this with gentleness, with friendship, with compassion. And now gently allow yourself to think about other people, other sentient beings, whoever comes to the space of your mind. Attend to them with your kindness and friendship. And let's take a few moments to practice this. Whoever comes into your mind, whoever appears in the space of your mind, attend to them with kindness. From this place of kindness, of friendship, attend everyone in the space of your mind. From the depth of your heart, from the light of pristine awareness, of your awareness, gently greet everyone and wish them well. And then, in the midst of this light and kindness, try to invite a person, someone who was not kind to you. Maybe they hurt you. Maybe not, but they were not kind. And gently, really gently, try to go to that place and see that person. Please attend to that person with the same loving kindness from your heart. Try gently. Attend to this person as a mother they may never had. Attend to them with love and compassion that they may never receive. They don't even know about it. Attend to this person. Look them in the eye with compassion. Radiate your light and your kindness to them. If they do not see and recognize your kindness, just do it, do so. And wish them and promise them that you will give them this kindness. You will deliver them this kindness. I will be your friend with my conduct, my contemplation. With my loving kindness to everyone. I will serve you as a guide. I will guide you to the place of love. And allow yourself to open to see the places, all the children surviving without love, without safety, without shelter, growing up in these defensive, demanding, hurtful adults. See that. Understand that. And shower them with your light. Shower them with your friendship. Be the light. Love them. Breathing in and breathing out. And with every out-breath, from your inexhaustible awareness, your awareness at your heart, let the light flow. Let it be abundance of light. Filling this room, your room, wherever you are, saturating the mind streams of every child with loving kindness. Just see every child showering with loving kindness. And now gently, again, gently, gently come back to the core of your heart. Come back to your heart. The light, the bindu of light. And resolve all the images, all the stories, situations, all attentiveness. Dissolve all within this moment and rest. Rest again in the stream of your light. In your stream of your awareness. Rest for a moment. And now, by realizing everything gently, again, slowly, let's bring this session to the close at your own pace and dedicate the merit of this practice forever it's precious to you, and let's dedicate for the peace and compassion in our world. May it be so. Thank you. Any final note or word? There was the one thing I didn't say. I usually mention that. In the most difficult moments, try to look after others. Try to give. Try to look after children. Be kind. And I'm one of you, us, and one of you, and I'm nothing better. I'm just learning. I'm just trying. But keep trying. Thank you.